G'day everyone, welcome back to Free Kick on air for another week. We have a full cast of characters joining us tonight to talk about round 4 of the AFLW, and boy is it nice to not have to say week 4. I was reminded this morning that around about this time last year, we were sweating on the double game weeks and the implications that was going to have. So it is a massive relief to be able to talk about normal rounds. Jono, I'll throw to you first. How are you feeling about your trades this week after we last talked live, well, at least talked in a recorded format? We hadn't had any injury announcements. We were talking on a Sunday night. How's the side looking? You feeling confident about your trades?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think I am about to make roughly the exact same mistake that I made last week, where I trade out a good defender. But at the same time, I'm feeling good that I'm going up on the other end to a player that I really, really want to have. So I'm looking at bringing in Riddell this week, and no matter what happens on the other side, I can't see that being a bad decision.
I would sure hope not, because I'm very much riding on her this week. Mel, the same goes for you. How are you feeling about your trades since the last time we chatted?
Feeling okay. Haven't changed them, which is nice. Hoping to get through this without doing any. Yeah, just hoping to make it through tonight without any last-minute tinkering, because I leave the country tomorrow, so I will probably not be watching any games or making any changes. So hopefully I can get through this unscathed.
Well, it's a good thing we don't have double game weeks then, because trying to leave the country, different time zone, and still manage that would have been an absolute nightmare. Well, without much further ado, let us jump straight into the teams that have been announced this evening. Now, thankfully, as much as you're saying, let's not do too much tinkering, we do have a lot of time before the first game, because we don't start until 12:35 on Saturday with Narm up against Richmond. That means that we have a number of changes for Richmond, but only one for Narm. That is Alicia Pisano going out, and in comes Gab Colvin. And then for Richmond, it's Beck Miller, Sarah Hosking, Montana McKinnon, and Lauren Brazzali. And out go Kate Dempsey managed, Montana Berylson omitted, Katie Brennan injured, and Mills Yassir omitted. First thing that jumps off the page to me, that might be one of the most experienced set of ins that you could possibly have for Richmond.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also it's going to be fascinating to see what this team looks like, because we've not seen them play with Montana McKinnon. It will be the first time we have seen this team, I feel like, in a while, without Katie Brennan playing, but with two rucks. So a very tall player likely to sit deep forward. And then also bringing back Beck Miller is a massive, massive gain. I think the main player that we need to talk about from this game is Sierra Greaves. She's probably the hottest rookie target this week. Mel, I'll throw to you first. What do you think is a sustainable... What would you predict she averages over the next 3 to 4 weeks?
Well, she has got 78 in one game where she looked fantastic. I would like to think she's still going to be making a really big impact, but I'm not sure if 78 is a bit of a pop score. So I'd probably say 65, maybe 70 on average over the next few weeks. But that's pretty good given she's priced at 500.
That would be exceptional if it was the case.
Yeah. So a little bit less bullish on her than her first score that we've seen, but I think she'll be a really good scorer. And I think she's looking pretty integral to that Richmond lineup.
I think that she brings a ball movement style that Richmond have sorely been lacking outside of Ellie McKenzie. Jono, what's your prediction on an average? And is she the most important player to trade in this week?
Yeah, so I think she's probably the number one target this week. I don't think I'm as bullish as Mel is. I'm a little bit nervous because I thought very similar things about India Rashid in the first round, because she looked excellent for that 71. And then since then, she's really dropped away. So I'm just a little bit nervous, I suppose, that it's going to be as high. But I think pretty much no matter what, off that first round score, she will be going up in price. I'd probably guess more like a 55 average from here, maybe 50.
Interesting that you think she's the number one trade-in target this week for a 55 average. I would have thought we'd get to it a bit more later with something like a Riddell.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I don't think Riddell is necessarily one that's like, if you don't get Riddell this week, you can get her in 3 weeks and she'll still be as good a trade-in. While Sierra Greaves, I think it's the cash gen that I'm looking at right now. I think it's between Sierra Greaves and Tess Boyd. I think they're probably the two that I'd toss up.
I 100% agree with you. And yeah, it's a case of Sierra Greaves will not be nearly as good as a trade-in in a week because she will have likely rocketed up in value without, and if you haven't got it, then you won't have much to show for it. Is anyone else? I know that there's a few players in this game that people have in their sides. Eden Zanker, Taylor Harris, Paxi Paxman. This is a pretty neutral matchup, if memory serves, for a lot of those positions. Anyone else? Have either of you got any targets in this game, or anyone that you're looking to trade out?
I think the big one is not someone I'm looking to trade out, but someone who wasn't named as an in or an out, and that's Shelley Heath. Which it's great that she's.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah,
yeah, and I think with that issue that she'd had last week, I think she's going to be quite underpriced compared to what I think she can deliver. And I think as a defensive target, if someone's looking for them, I'd say it's a pretty good time to jump on before she hopefully averages a lot more from here out.
Because that role was exceptional and she scored incredibly in that first quarter before I don't even think she made it the whole way through and still scored 39 or whatever and had,
that was just
bulk tackles,
which is unbelievable. So 39 and a quarter.
Yeah, look, it's one that I have actively been considering. And I would say that, when we did our rankings of defenders on the episode this week, part of the reason why I had her a little bit lower on my rankings was just the uncertainty around her injury. And at that stage, all we knew that it was a heart concern. We hadn't had really any positive word yet from Melbourne. So I kind of dropped her down. Given her price, cheap as she is, I think she might be one of the best kind of mid-priced targets this week because I do think you're probably going to get premium value. And considering that a lot of other premium defenders are at least 120, if not more K, more expensive, I think she's a prime target to go for.
Yeah, 100%. I'm also curious what your take is on Maeve Chaplin, Mel, because I know you're a big fan of her last year and she's just put up a higher score for the year.
Yeah, I mean, everything is looking really good for Maeve. We're seeing the same that we had from her last season. After a really big off season, she looked fantastic in that most recent game. 109 is huge. It is almost double, well, more than double, sorry, her previous score of 51. So a little bit of a consistency question mark there. But that means she averages 66 at the moment. I think that given she's just had a massive price rise, it might not be the time to jump on it necessarily in this game. But I mean, if you're looking around that price range of the 748, you might as well go over to Heath. I'm assuming they're much the same, 757. Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't have an extra 9K, she could be an option also.
I think the 12 tackles is feeling somewhat unsustainable. If you were to ask me, given that
you don't say.
she'd had 4 before that, whereas Heath had a lot of tackles. She's playing midfield, and there are other defenders who will tackle more, but they will show that kind of like 5 to 6 tackle per game consistency.
I've been wondering throughout the week whether or not it's I suppose a consequence of Melbourne losing Liv Purcell, because if you have, like in those first 2 games, Melbourne controlled the midfield. The ball wasn't spending a lot of time in defensive 50, but Collingwood really, they were all over them at centre clearance, and I think ended up mostly breaking even around the ground. And it just meant the ball was in that defense more than it has been previously. And it's pretty young defense. They don't have the tacklers that you would expect. So I guess Maeve Chaplin probably takes the lead on that. I'm wondering, I don't think 109 is sustainable, obviously, but like, is it something where she could go over 70 from this point?
I think so. And just like looking at her upcoming fixture. So Naarm have Richmond, which is a good matchup, Yarta-Pulti, which is a good matchup, and then 3 bad games in a row with Walyalup, Gold Coast, and Essendon. You know, if you were, I think at that stage you go, I don't feel like she will be a top 6, top 5 defender, or at least under the blanket of that top of the line. Given it's a good 2-game run, I think if you're willing to book possibly a trade in and ride the Cass rise, then by all means go for it. It's not personally one I'd prefer. I think if I'm looking at that mark, I'm going Heath every day.
Yeah.
Now, moving across to the second game of Saturday, we've got Gold Coast up against GWS. So it's the Expansion Cup. And for GWS, out goes Alicia Eva with a hamstring injury, and in comes popular rookie forward Grace Koch. And then for the Suns, out goes, sadly, Charlie Rowbottom, injured with a to-be-determined severity shoulder injury, AC joint, out, as well as Taylor Gregory, Charlotte Wilson, and Mira Gervin, with Gervin and Wilson both injured, and we kind of saw that in the Port Adelaide game. And then in comes Lauren Bella to replace Gregory in the ruck, Wallace Randell, Keely Fullerton, and Claudia Whitford. First up, I think it's devastatingly disappointing that Grace Koch comes back in, will likely spend a bit of time in the ruck, and in comes the restrictive ruck for the Gold Coast Suns, which really stunts the crash growth, which is just delightful. But first up, I'd say the most impactful part of this is the fact that Charlie Rowbottom is out injured. Now, of the two of you, Mel and Jono, do either of you happen to own Charlie Rowbottom in a kind of informal keeper league that we run?
What? How did you know? That's crazy.
That's just a wild one. So that's very unfortunate for whomever that might be's team.
Awful.
Who do we think that there's someone who now pops as a scorer as a result of Rowbottom going out? Does Neve McLaughlin keep the midfield role? She had 6 CBAs or something, and she had 3 centre clearances in that time.
Yeah. No, I do think that it's likely they keep experimenting a little bit. Whether or not it results in, a bump score again, because again, Claudia Whitford comes in. So I think they already had the space to do that experiment last week. So I'm not sure if it will be much more time, but I definitely think we'll see it again for at least a quarter.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I don't think GWS is not a great matchup for defenders, although I do think that Gold Coast are going to break some rules here with how well teams are able to move it inside their D50. I think Whitford is the player that, if you were looking to take a real stab, I might see how she plays, because she's someone, I think her highest average might have been up around that 90, mid-90s a couple of years ago, she averaged. First game, she had a 37. It's not good, so her break-even will be astronomically high. But if we needed to take a stab, or you were at the stage where you were looking to loop, an extra premium through the midfield, a run of, what is their run of? So GWS is a good matchup. Then they got Carlton, Kuana, Naarm for the 3 weeks after. If she bottoms out in price, or her hits her break even or close enough, given I still think that there's going to be cash to be lost, I wouldn't hate taking a stab. It's a very speculative one, but I really don't hate it as a cash generation play.
I mean, do you think you'd jump on her at her current price? Because I think she's more likely to go down this week than up.
I think she's going to go down this week. It would be next week that I want to see a week from her healthy, given that she pulled out late with a calf complaint. That don't like, minor calf complaints that keep cropping up, that's a real red flag for consistency. So I need to see a week of health and as the player leading the midfield. But I think it's one player that I will have my eye on, just given what she's done in the past. In terms of kind of any other plays from this game, it is someone that there have been a few questions about. It is the league's #1 pressure defender, Cambridge McCormick. Given the fact that she is 120k more expensive than Shelley Heath, is she worth the money? Throwing open to the floor.
Oh, I mean, if we don't think she's going to go down, what's she priced at? 875. Yeah, so you're paying full price essentially. I'm not too sure. Like, I don't enjoy trading in players after they've just had a big score. To me, that's like a #1 way to lose money. And she came off 107 after a 15-kick game last week. So to me, that just says wait a week. Although if we're thinking about it for the Gold Coast matchup, we don't have a week necessarily. Yeah, it's screaming not this week to me. And Jono's probably going to say not at all.
No, I can't let my personal frustrations go out there. I'm wondering if the reason she scored so big, though, was because there was it's the first game where they've had a huge inside 50 deficit. The ball was around her a lot more. I don't think that's going to happen this week. So I don't think you're going to get the bump score trading her in this week. But the run after that it's good enough that I can see them having that deficit again. I think long-term she'll be fine. I just wouldn't trade her in, as Mel says, for the bump score this week. It doesn't seem like the one.
Yeah, and if I think she's great. I think she's going to be a great defender. It will be interesting to see if they continue to go back to the well, given that she led them for meters gained, led them for tackles. And when I said that she is currently the league's best pressure defender, she is currently second for defensive half pressure acts, behind only Kiara Bowers by 3, which, if continued for the entire season, would be the highest a key defender has ever ranked. And she is also inside the top 20 for tackles in the competition. And I think she's at 17th, which would be more than 15 ranks higher than a key defender has ever finished a season. So I wasn't just being hyperbolic there, obviously small sample size, but I think that if that maintains and Cam Bernasconi keeps her in defence,
well, yeah,
there's still a case to be made trading her in.
Field in the forward line is probably a worrying, that's an easy switch to make throughout the match.
There's a million easy switches in Cam's mind.
Yeah.
Just Izzy Huntington, you go back. Daisy Walker, you go forward. Eleanor Brown, you're now in the ruck. Tani Evans, you're now back at halfback for 2 minutes. Georgia Garnett, you're playing at fullback. Kat Smith on the wing. Who knows? Seriously. It's impossible.
Quick question for you guys. I don't know if there's a lot of red dots going around, but with both Riddell and Noffy playing at similar times, would you take a punt on Zali Goldsworthy as a VC?
Absolutely. That's where I'm looking at the moment.
Who's your red dot?
I'm potentially trading into a red dot in the Port Adelaide game.
I can't imagine who that might be.
It could be anyone, but
it could be anybody that we've talked about.
It's actually
ever.
Very clever, Jono. I personally won't be, because I know that I'm not going to be on my phone enough to check it and to actually utilize anything there. But that's not a helpful answer for anyone else. What are you thinking, Liam?
I'll be going Zali Goldsworthy VC. I think, and I said as much in the article this week, I think that the matchup is perfection for a player like her. She breaks from stoppage. She goes for meters gained. She had a massive couple of quarters at times in the Adelaide game, hitting up for short marks. I think that the Gold Coast Suns are a rebuilding side. That's about as kindly as I can put it. And they just give up whatever the other team wants. The other play that I think could be fascinating here, well, it would have been more fascinating if Lauren Bella hadn't been named, but going with Ailish O'Dowd, who has spent more time, she spent more time than I've been expecting, just playing as a mid at centre bounces and not as the ruck. I think she would have been a fascinating play if you were looking for something a bit left of field when it comes to the ruck line. And like they have one bad matchup in the next 4 for rucks, and they have like a great 4 weeks for midfielders. It's just a pity that Lauren Bella is back. And I feel like that is the kind of player that will just body O'Dowd enough at stoppage, particularly in the ruck, to kind of take the edge off her scoring.
Yeah.
If anyone else, please, if there's anyone else you want to talk about, please speak now. Otherwise, I'm going to move to Carlton and the Western Bulldogs. So,
all good.
Western Bulldogs outgo Annalie McKee and Sarah Pousty. So, if you are, hang on, what time's the game start? Yeah, perfect. If you are someone who owns Sarah Pousty, you don't need to trade her out. She could be a really handy red dot for you for 1 week, and it gives you some bankable cash for next week. And in comes Kaylee Kimber and Dee Berry. So the captain is back in the side. Fascinating to see what that does to their midfield balance. And then for Carlton, Lila Keck omitted, Jess Good injured, and in comes Mia Austin after 1 week away. And Madison Torpy, who is a rookie ruck, 300K, has some exceptional stats in the VFLW. Now, Mel, I heard you get noticeably, audibly excited at the prospect of a cheap ruck. Heaven forbid you don't go there for the 4th week in a row.
No, thankfully, I'm actually not going to bring in another rookie ruck. I'm actually going to bring in Ali Morfitt and start taking the ruck line seriously. But it is tempting, here another 300K.
Hang on, you're making another trade in the ruck, though?
Yes. I am doing my 4th ruck trade in 4 weeks, but I'm not fucking around anymore, at least.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But yeah, as a 2-week play, Madison Torpy, sorry, I got distracted by laughing at Mel's trades in the ruck. I was actually going to bring up her VFLW stats.
Yes, please do.
Off the top of my head, I think she might have had a 140 in her final game at VFLW. No, yep, I think so. Torpy.
I see a 35 in her last game.
Oh, no. You know what I'm thinking of? Yeah, it's Keely Hardingham. Yeah. That's who I'm thinking of. The season prior, she got injured. Yeah, I think 98 of a ceiling.
Yeah.
Definitely some potential there. I'm shocked that more teams weren't offering her a spot on the list. So I think that there is a solid fantasy player there. I just don't know if 2-week play is long enough to go there. There was probably some talk about Bree Harrington being a trade target if they weren't going to name another ruck. Jono, is she still a target given that she has been comfortably hitting 80-plus average in the first 3 weeks?
Yeah, no, I mean, if she can do that against Brisbane, I don't see who she can't do that against, to be honest. I mean, that's an impressive score up there. So I wouldn't think that given the price she's at, there's a whole bunch of other rucks around the same price that I'd have a lot more faith in. But if you're searching for someone unique, I've got no problems with it.
Yeah, it's not a player that I'm going to be seeking out per se, but it is one that I will be keeping my eyes on. The other player, and I kind of mentioned it off the rip, Dee Berry back in. We have had very little word on what kind of role she's going to play. She's had a fairly interrupted preseason. Is she going to get thrown into the midfield, and will this affect the queen of effective disposals, Elizabeth Georgia-Stathis?
Well, that one did feel sarcastic.
Well, I don't know where you could have got that from. That's outrageous slander.
Yeah, I mean, she's proven an excellent tag at Georgia-Stathis. My question is, who's she going to be lining up on this week? She completely shut down Eliza West last week. Like, West really did very little.
Abby, I reckon, with McKay off, what was it, like an 17, 18 contested possessions, several clearances last week.
Yeah,
I think that's who Giorgio will go to. But I do wonder if there's maybe slightly less time, or it might be that, it just shifts the balance a little bit. I expect that as captain, she will at least get some time through the middle, given her history.
I mean, we can say that Georgia-Stathis' best score was when she played as a defender. So I'm really not worried about what position she plays at this stage, because I think whether she's in the middle or in defense, I think she's going to be racking up the ball.
Yes, possible. Where did the Western Bulldogs like as a defender matchup? They are the bluest. They're the greenest of green. They're as good as you can get. So I don't think it's a bad week for Georgia Stathis owners. Whether or not she can kind of hang with the speed of ball movement that Carlton have been going with and deployed kind of excellently against Brisbane remains to be seen. This game is an interesting one. Like we've got Darcy Vescio, and they've been they've had a couple of decent scores in a row. Is it a case of this is the final week left in the side before trading out, going up against Gold Coast, where I don't expect the ball to be back there a whole lot?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think DV's definitely got a time limit where a lot of other players that we're running on field don't. Mel, did you start DV?
I did, but the 28 scared me off effective immediately, which is a shame because they went on to score 2 high 50s. So not a holder currently.
Yeah, I think I'm joining you this week, currently in my trade-out plans.
Given that she did spend time forward in the fourth quarter last week, which is something that I thought might be a little bit more likely when they brought in Shifa O'Connell. Just kind of shifted their defensive balance a bit. And what's her name? Amelia Velado had stayed in the team.
Yeah.
I'm still devastated I didn't start with Ronnie Fitzpatrick, but I'm not going to dwell on that. It just makes me sad. Moving across, Jono, to your Hawks up against Euroke, so St Kilda. For the Hawks, out go Caitlin Ashmore and Najwa Allen, both injured, and in come first-year player Lavinia Cox and second-year forward Sophie Butterworth. And then for Euroke, it's Nicola Stevens out and Liv Vesely, and in come Bianca Jacobson and Charlotte Simpson. I am a Patrikios owner, and so I'm going to make it about me for a little bit here. The role was dreadful this past week. Spent a lot of time at half forward. Wasn't even rolling up that high to stoppage. Was having 2 stints on the bench every quarter. Was clearly hampered with an ankle injury. Managed to pop a semi-decent final quarter to get to a number that didn't start with a 4, which would have been truly depressing. If you were in my position or you're a holder of Patrikios, is the fact that Liv Vesely is out enough to keep her in your side? Or is the indication that a half-forward role is still in Nick Del Santo's frame of reference enough to say, yeah, you got to go? Particularly given, you have a bunch of options to get to. Kate Hoare isn't far away. Ailish Sheeran is an option. Or you could be fielding Zippy Fish if you weren't already.
As someone that has a forward from St Kilda in their side in Chloe Bosanko, I would not recommend risking it. It does not look like a high fantasy point scoring area to be in, especially against Hawthorn. But I think the saving grace here is Liv Vesely's out, so I think you could almost buy another week. And what hasn't been too dreadful of a price loss, it was really just the score loss, I guess. So I think if the scoring can come back this week, you're probably not making a lot of cash on top of Patrikios trade out-wise, but I think you're going to get somewhere closer to her previous scores of 89 rather than the 50.
Yeah, it feels just like a mid-60 to me up against Hawthorn, given that she is not a tackler. I think that's the biggest concern. And we saw, I think it might have been the highest tackling game of the year was Hawthorn against the Western Bulldogs. And at the moment, Hawthorn are struggling to switch, kind of get lateral from stoppage fast enough and kind of avoid lots of repeat stoppages. So I think it's personally a trade, just given that kind of matchup. It does kind of scare me a little bit.
I think Ashmore out is going to hurt us as well, trying to get the ball on the outside. So we could be in for another slog of a game.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. Now, I wanted to just raise something. Johnny, you can speak to this. Laura Stone been, a good pick if you started her this year, 2 decent scores in a row. What do you think her timeline is? What do you think her timeline is to keep her in our teams, given we got a positive update, or at least Hawthorn fans got a positive update on Jazz Fleming's return.
Yeah, I mean, I think running her basically until Fleming comes back into the side will be fine. I think the second she comes back, I am very concerned, because that is a player who could, well, I mean, not just could, should immediately take all of her midfield minutes. Like, I'm a big fan of Laura Stone, but I think she'll jump down to the 20% sort of level, and Fleming will step back in. I think Fleming's ability to sort of break from stoppage and create a better run and carry is a big reason why at the moment we're struggling with these sort of contested games. We can't find a way to break that congestion. And yeah, so I'm really hopeful that Fleming and Gilroy come back at some point soon, just so we can find these different ways through. But until then, I think Stone's consistency as one of the cheaper forwards we'll be running on field is very, very good. I wouldn't worry about any matchups or anything, because I think they're basically playing the best role you could be hoping for.
Agreed. And it's a good run upcoming. So it's St Kilda this week, Adelaide next week, Collingwood the week after that. All good matchups. If you were to ask me, I would expect that Collingwood is probably the week that Fleming comes back. And this is kind of why I raised it. You know, if you've got her in your side, you're probably going to get 2 solid enough scores, and then it's going to be the agonising, do you keep her whilst she's got the player that she probably replaced the most back in the team, in the hopes that it's one good matchup and then you get rid of it? Or do you just launch and immediately get rid of her? So I'm not suggesting we need an answer now, but I'm just raising it in people's consciousness, people's awareness, because I think it's going to be an agonising decision in a couple of weeks. Now, another question, and I've been a popular discussion. We agreed that they were the number 1 defender likely for the year. Tilly, Lucas, Rod, at their price. If you've got Serene Watson, say, would you be going all the way up? Let's say you already have Shelley Heath as well. Would you be going all the way up to TLR? Would you be going cheaper for a player that just had a bad score but can definitely score at a premium level in Charlotte Thomas? Obviously, the GOAT, Cambridge McCormick, is an option as well. Where would you be looking? No, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so I'm trading at Serene Watson, and it's a problem. Like, this is my backline focus week, and my gosh, there's just so many players that I want to bring in. But I'm going Watson to Tess Boyd. But if I could, like, because I'm putting my money in my ruck, but if I was putting my money in my defense, it would be TLR for sure. I think you've got some really good options of where you can be spending in defense. But if you're at the point where the backline is your focus, you might as well go for the top and like bring in the player that you think is going to average the highest for the season, now that we're kind of coming into week 4 and a lot of people have fairly finalised teams. So if that's the line you're spending up in, I reckon you might as well just go big.
Fair enough. Jono, are you of the same opinion, noting that TLR's priced at probably over 90 at this stage? So you are paying a pretty penny.
I don't think you're paying for the value. I think you're paying for someone who you're expecting to be 10 points higher than the next best defender, which I do think is a decent shout. So it's kind of tough, because I think we're still at the point of the season where you're looking for value. And I think it'd be unlikely that you'd find a lot of teams who have all of Tess Boyd or Shelley Heath or like some of the more obvious plays that you'd be wanting to be getting. But if you're in a position where you're storing up cash rather than spending up on the big defender this week, I'd probably do that. Yeah. Because I do think, like all of us were saying, Lucas Rod is pretty much a lock for that first D1 role. I just, it's one of those things that the sides that I see who have Tilly are clearly better in their defensive lineup than the rest of us.
Yeah. And they're only 23% owned. Like, I think for like you said, you're not really paying for the value here, but you're almost getting value in the fact that if you're ready to finalize certain positions, you trade them in now and you're done. And you get a couple of weeks advantage. Like, if we think that the competition is leading towards TLR in their side at some point, if you've got the capacity to do it now, it does give you that advantage while they're a little bit lower owned.
Particularly when there are a number of people able to run a rookie, at least for another fortnight, I reckon, at M5 in Zippy Fish. We have yet to see a down score, and that's extremely impressive. So, yeah, I'm of the same opinion, but it's just something to consider. Like, as much as we think that they're the top defender, it is the price stat that is a real impediment to me, like, launching into that trade-in. Right, well, speaking of launching, let's launch right into Sunday's games. We've got Sydney against Walyalup, so Fremantle. We've got so we haven't got confirmed teams yet, but we do know that there are at least 2 players out injured. Sophia Hurley, which is devastating for Sydney because she looked excellent last game, kicked a beautiful goal from a boundary, is out injured, as well as Emma O'Driscoll, probably the one player that Walyalup could least afford to lose. Currently named in Ruby Sargent-Wilson, Beck Privatelli, Lexi Hamilton, and Sarah Grundon. And then for Walyalup, it's Holly Eifold, Ash Brazel, Gabrielle Beatonweg-Webster, and Georgie Brisbane. I'm going to go out and say with a degree of certainty that it's Ash Brazel in for Emma O'Driscoll. Happy to book that one very, very quickly as immediately the most likely situation. As for Sydney, I have nary the foggiest idea as to who is going to come in for Sophia Hurley. Like, I'm still shocked that Beck Privatelli isn't getting a game, given that 2 seasons ago she was an All-Australian. Or, well, is that correct? Oh, like, she had an incredible season.
She was.
Yeah, incredible. Like, undeniably excellent. It's a shock to see she's still not playing. In terms of this game, Mel, you've already talked about the fact you're trading in Ali Morfitt. I think that's a totally fine decision. He's obviously a tough matchup this week, but Fremantle do love to be generating repeat stoppages. That is very much where they thrive.
Yes.
Outside of Morfitt, I'd say that Kiara Bauer's dour second half probably presents the most alarming question. Mel, I'm going to throw this question to you. I know you have to jump off soon, so it feels right to ask you a Fremantle question. Are we going to see Lisa Webb throw around the magnets early to try and find some consistency for Fremantle after probably the worst run of 2 games in AFLW history?
Yeah.
Not wanting to belabor the point, or does she wait until maybe half-time before we see some flicking around? Noting that Bowers did have, I think, maybe 1 or 2 centre bounces where she started off the half-forward line.
Yeah, which I didn't love. I kind of feel like given Sydney are on a tear and Freo are on a tear in the other direction, I suspect there'll be a lot of changing throughout the whole game, which does make me nervous for Bowers' scoring potential in this one. So I think I'm not really expecting great things necessarily, but I'd happily be surprised if Bowers spends the whole game in the midfield. I think that this would be a game to trade out for potentially if you've not got any other big things going on. I'm not filled with confidence.
Neither. And I agree that there's a case to be made that she's a trade out this week. I don't think it's going to be the highest priority for a lot of people. I think there's going to be a few rookies now that are able to be cashed out for cash generation. But it's just one to more actively keep an eye on. We've kind of seen the same old Fremantle for the first, 10 quarters of the season, and then it all started to feel very Fremantle-y again. It's just never being able to predict what's going to happen. So if you do get a chance to flick across and watch this game on Sunday afternoon, I think there is definitely a case to be made for doing so. I'd say as well, another 2 players to target if you don't have them, Montanahan, Chloe Malloy, we both feel that they're going to be, we all agree that they're going to be top 3 forwards this year. This is, I feel like a great matchup for both of them. Both score well inside forward 50 and in transition. I think it's absolutely a play to jump on.
I think you're right in Brazil coming in for O'Driscoll. I'd argue that O'Driscoll is a little bit more impactful in the back line. So this could be another big week for Chloe Molloy.
Yeah, it's always great when the team that has butchered the ball and allowed 1 million possessions in transition and uncontested ball inside 50, for that team to lose their number one intercept player and the number one intercept player in the competition last year. Yeah, so that's a lovely one for people to enjoy. If you are a fan of Fremantle, unless there's anyone else. Oh, actually, probably one player to name. Just keep an eye out for whether or not Amelia Martin retains a spot in the squad. She had a good game first up, although it was against the Easy Beats in Gold Coast. And she's currently named on an extended bench. She had a very quiet game last week. Only scored 12 points and had 5 disposals. So might be that as much as she could be one of the few forward rookies to downgrade to if you have them, that it is a short ride in your team. But it's probably also a handy loop to have playing on the Sunday.
Yes. Well, I won't smoke bomb this time. I'll actually say goodbye. Chat to you all later. And fingers crossed no major disasters happen in the next few weeks that mean that I need to be regularly checking my trades, because that's not going to be an option. So we'll see what happens when I'm back.
Hopefully for you and for all of us, that is true. And I appreciate the lack of smoke bomb so that I don't throw a question to you after I haven't heard anything in 5 minutes, which is great last time for those that listened in. All right.
Not bad. Bye.
See you later. All right, Jono, over to Kawana against the Brisbane Lions. Again, we don't have confirmed squads. No outs for Brisbane, and named on an extended bench are Arania Crozier, Dion. Oh, Dion Heslop. It used to be D. And Evie Long. And then for Kawana, out goes Irish defender Kaylee Cronin. Likely leaving the side for Sarah Allen, who was a late out last week. Also named in Lily Tarleton, Rochelle Martin, and Tia Charlton. Off the bat, Tia Charlton feels like a walk-up start every week in this team, as is Sarah Allen. In terms of the players that named on the bench that might leave, my guess is that it's Kira Mueller.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Or it could also be Keely Custerman. Those would be the two that I feel like. Or Amy Boyle. Well, Amy Boyle can't kick 2 goals on the weekend, so probably not.
I thought they were pretty good. Yeah,
I thought they were pretty solid for what we're, and we're actually able to kick goals relatively efficiently from their touches inside 50, which has not been true of Adelaide for a lot of this year. It's basically been 1 quarter, or 2 quarters, sorry, and back-to-back, quarter 4 against Geelong and quarter 1 against GWS, where they've actually been efficient inside 50. Now, this game, like, it doesn't feel like we're going to see a lot of players that we're targeting this week. I'd say the bigger watch is just how are Brisbane going to respond, given that we've seen a lot of chopping and changing on some of the key roles for players that we've otherwise liked. It's been Brie Conan, I feel like every 25 minutes she's playing in a different spot on the field. Had her best scoring Porter playing in defence last week. It would almost be better if she played in defence, because I think Adelaide are the best matchup in the comp for defenders at the moment. If you've got Brie Conan in your team, do you jump at Shadows and look to try and go down to Shelley Heath or down to Tessa Boyd if you don't already have her? Or is it a case of watching for a week, knowing that if ever there was a time for Conan to play a defensive role, it would be this week on Ebony Marinoff. And I feel like, of all players, Brie Conan is someone who's kind of built in that similar mould to run with Noffy around the ground.
Yeah, I've been mulling this over a lot of the week because, as I was saying, I'm going to be trading out a defender who's probably going to have a pop score. And my choices really were between Brie Conan or Paxi Paxman, both of whom I think are good defenders. I just need the money to get up to Riddell from somewhere. And I think, it's hard to go against Conan just because I do think that tackling run with roll is likely. If not on Marinoff, then on Hatchard, who also played an excellent game last week. So I think I want to stick with Conan. I expect Brisbane will bounce back, and last week was just not the effort that they would be hoping for. It's interesting because I think both teams have sort of shown signs of weakness that in previous seasons we haven't seen. So I think this is going to be an interesting match to see where both teams are at.
I agree, because both teams have shown the capacity to dominate territorially, but not be able to convert it to points on the scoreboard, which I think is both of their biggest issues at the moment. So I'm fully on board with what you're saying. I feel like Koenen is a hold this week for that reason.
Yeah.
And I feel like she will get midfield time and defensive time, and I think both are solid roles for her this week. So
yeah,
I'm fully on board with it, but it is a big watch. Now, Ellie Hampson has been named in the midfield. I think she's had some bursts after we talked about her kind of before round 2, had moments in the last 2 weeks, hasn't exactly lit up the scoreboard. She's still on my watch list because she keeps getting this role. I find it fascinating that they're both named in the midfield because I feel like it's been one of Koenen or Hampson playing in there so far. So I am fascinated to see what choices get made there.
I think Hampson was actually their highest midfielder in the middle last week. It was after Talia Hickey. I think she had nearly 70%.
Yeah, and it's been a very down year for Ali Anderson, given that for the last 2-3 seasons, she has been just bang on 100 pretty much every week. And even had that massive score against Melbourne last year, down 390k with a high score of 78 only. Yeah. Again, she might be better option than Claudia Whitford.
Yeah, that's probably my number one sort of watch at the moment, is to just see, because eventually you've got to expect someone of her quality turns it around, and she's going to be very, very cheap soon.
And at this rate, we're going to be able to downgrade to Sophie Conway as a rookie, down 476k already with a high score of only 56. Just ridiculous. I don't know if so 56, the highest score was last week. That 16 in round 1 will drop out of her price cycle. So I think there's a world where she might not get much below 600k, but there's a world where if you're running, I don't know, Havana Harris in your the Sarah Pousty, it's a hop, skip, and a jump up. Or if you've got Havana Harris, you're downgrading, making cash to someone who we know is a premium scorer. But at the moment, Brisbane don't look themselves, and neither do Adelaide. If you so let's say you don't have Riddell, but you have Bowers, Sparkus, Goldsworthy in your team. Are you still putting straight C on Ebony Marinoff? Or are you going to be trying to look elsewhere? Just given, she's still probably going to score above 100. She's done it most weeks, except what we're seeing this year is that every week there's just been that one quiet quarter.
Yeah, I don't think she's shown enough to say if you don't have Riddell that you shouldn't be captaining her. I mean, her worst is 103 is still a very good floor score for any captain. I feel like almost everyone else, Gardner may be able to go 150, but then she puts up an 84. That's a much lower score. I'd be comfortable leaving on the C if I didn't have any Riddell options in my team. But
sounds like you are going to have the Riddell option in your team, so you needn't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. I don't think I'm going to be going with Noffy this week. I will probably be looking to get Zali Goldsworthy first into Riddell and pivot my trades if I need to find a red dot. Moving across to Kangaroos against Collingwood at Arden Street at 3:00 on Sunday afternoon. Out, probably the biggest news of the week, both from a fantasy and a football sense, is Jazz Garner out for 2 to 4 weeks with an ankle strain. Now, they're saying it was not substantial damage. We're not going to need to see any surgery, which is massive news for North and massive news for fantasy fans as well. At the moment, named into play Emma King, Ariana Hetherington, Amy Gavin Mangan, and Bella Eddy. And then no outs for Collingwood, but named on an extended bench are Murin Atkinson, Eliza James, and Captain Ruby Slasher. Now, we're going to talk about North Melbourne first. They are possibly the most stacked side I have ever watched. If you just compare it to the level of everyone else that they're playing against. Emma King and Bella Eddy feel like walk-up starts
You'd think so, yeah.
Look, Bella Eddy. So up until she missed like 2 weeks ago, she had never missed a game since she was drafted. So I think that is a definition of a walk-up start.
Yeah.
Emma King is vital for that structure that Coach Crocker has stuck with for the last 3 years in their kind of super successful, like consistent era. Who drops out? So currently named on their extended bench, they've got O'Shea, Tripodi, Smith, Wall, O'Loughlin, Gavin Mangan, Ariana Hetherington, and Emma King.
Yeah.
Who misses out? Who misses out currently? Because it is brutal if you are, given they just put up 114, and I feel like pretty much everyone played well.
Yeah. What I find interesting about North is that they're one of the few teams who name their team sheets appropriately. So players are placed where they're probably going to play, and the bench usually has the last 3 dropping away.
So Emma King not playing then?
Yeah, I was really surprised to see her named right at the end there, because I can't see it happening. But it could mean that we have someone on field missing unexpectedly.
Looking through, I think you're going to have a tough time. I think
there's nothing easy. It's an incredible team. So
I would say the one player who didn't have their best performance was Vicky Wall last week. Was the only North Melbourne player to not have double-digit disposals, which is stupid. That is a fake stat. Really didn't impact as much as literally everyone else felt like they were at North. There is a number of players that kind of popped scores in that game. A few to talk about. Blaheen Bogue kicked 4, scored a 79. She's currently sitting 3rd overall in the goal kicking tally. And I obviously knew that was going to happen when I started with her. It's a question that's kind of popped up a few times, and we've got one here from Roger in the comment section. Is Blaheen Bogue a trade out, or does she have more money to make? And then there have also been people thinking about trading Blaheen Bogue in, given that she just scored a 79 and the only score that's leaving her price cycle was a 49. Where do you sit? I'm loving having her at F5. Truly a beautiful experience. I'm so glad that I went with that pick. Amongst many others that floated through that F5. But if you haven't got her, are you bringing her in? And if you have, are you considering the trade out if she's sitting on your bench?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, unbelievable. Like, my concerns over her job security have really not been important given all these injuries that have been happening, and she's stuck it out in a stacked side. And
it helps that she kicked 2 goals in the only quarter that they really dominated against Geelong. Sorry. So that was like, okay, right. Well, so we see the talent there, and then she's had, I think she might have had 3 goal assists against Port Adelaide. Even if she didn't kick a bag, that always helps in the coach's eyes. Now she's kicked 4 and looked, and 2 really good ones as well. So I think she's staying in. In terms of what she's going to average from here is brutal because it's someone we know so little about.
So, to start with, I wouldn't be trading her in. I know that 79 was a great score to have as a forward, but I really don't see that as a realistic, sustainable target. I think you have a 100-point win, you're a forward in that team, you're going to be, doing very, very well there. I don't think, as much as I expect North to win by a good margin every week, I don't think they're going to be winning by that much all the time. They've got tougher games to come. So I would probably be expecting more of those 40s with the occasional pop score, which I think is, not, if you've got her in, I think there's still cash to be made. It's just not a huge amount of cash to be made. So I would probably be holding either situation, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I'd be trading at this stage. I think this is another great matchup for her, given that she's probably either they're going to put a defender on her that's slower or that's smaller, and that's not a good spot to be. No. I think it's like probably Amber Schutt or Annie Lee that get that matchup, and I don't think it's going to be an ideal spot. and she's shown that she can score in the wet or in the dry. So I would be holding for another week. I think there's still, maybe 75 to 100K left to make.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where if you haven't got there's not enough sort of left to make that I'd be targeting it. But at the same time, 100K is 100K. You're not turning that down. So I'd hold.
No. I just think it's the limited number of possessions, I think, is the reason why I wouldn't be trading her in. So she's had 11, 12, and 15, 72% time on ground last week. I think it's enough to say, yep, great pick if you started, but don't try and trade in. I think that you should be looking for the next player to jump on who has a pop score. The other player that's been a target popped up in some questions. I raised it right at the very end of our recording for this week earlier. Ailish Sheeran. Now, she's got the midfield role after Jazzy goes down, scores 90 points, I think, after quarter time. If you're someone like me who has Georgia Patrikios, is this the spot to go? Is this the player to launch into at M5, maybe even kind of having even just for a cash generation play, given she's currently cheaper than Zippy Fish. She's stupid. I think Zippy Fish is less than 200K cheaper than Georgie Prasparkas. That is mind-bending maths. But I got distracted. Ailish Sheeran. Is she enough to target this week, given that she is currently sitting at 806K after having dropped 217s to start the year?
Yeah, I think this is a risk worth taking. I think that was obviously a great score. We've seen it in the past. In the first couple rounds, I think the low scores were partially that she was still coming back from that injury. She had very low time on ground, but we didn't see any of that in that third game. So I think it's a worthwhile risk to take on if you're running a Patrikios. I don't know if I'd go there from a Zippy Fish if I'm considering that, or from Bowers. But if you're going, a riskier fifth mid, then yeah, I'd be happy to jump on there.
I'm fully on board with you. Now, in terms of midfielders that, hold, trade, or trade out or trade in, Ash Centra had her best game so far up against Melbourne, had the most time in the midfield that we'd seen from her so far. I say actually her best round. She's got a 48. She had 51 the week before. But most time that we've seen her play in the midfield, 468K, that 22 leaves the price cycle this week, and she's gone up time on ground every week. If you've got her, I say you hold her in all likelihood. Given that she is cheaper than Sierra Greaves, could you go there if you couldn't afford that extra 31K?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's been fantastic. If you look at some of those highlights against Melbourne, I think she was a big reason that they did manage to at least break even in the stoppages, if not, improve in the clearances. She was seriously impressive just with their ability to find space. It was a lot of, a handball here, but her disposal's fantastic. I think they're going to keep trying to find her, and she's going to slowly build across the season. It's certainly a long hold. I don't think it's like a quick cash riser, which someone like Sierra Greaves might be. But if you can't afford Sierra Greaves, I'd be very comfortable bringing in Ash Centra again.
Yeah, it's. I feel like we're just seeing, we're seeing 11% more time on ground. I feel like we're seeing 11% more moments from Centra where you go, that's why she went pick one. I still don't know if at stoppages she's up to speed. And I don't know if that's necessarily injury. I think that might just be as a result of constantly being that bigger body who could dominate at junior level, which is often why she had such dominant fantasy scores. Still feel like she's just playing a little bit in slow-mo compared to other players in there.
It's also one of the toughest runs you could have for the Pies. It's like not what's gone, but what's the next 3 games. So I do think it's going to be a slow burn, which is why I was comfortable holding her at the start of the season and just waiting because, you can only trade in and out rookies every so often. I'd generally be wanting to trade out players who have, made all their cash and trading in players who are booming. But yeah, Centra's one who's, I think, across the season just going to slowly get better and better every week as she gets used to the pace, as she starts to find that speed in the midfield. I think it's going to be helpful.
Agreed. Now, speaking of pace, let's try and get through these last couple of games and get to some questions quickly before you rabbit on for too long. Next up, it's Essendon against Geelong at Windy Hill on Sunday afternoon. It's Daria Bannister out injured. In come Grace Brooker, Steph Wales, Mia Van Dyke, Sophie Strong, and then for Geelong, 2 omissions. Massive omissions, if you ask me. Mel Bragg, who surprisingly omitted, given that she's one of the few rucks on this list, or one of the few players who have been rucking. And then the captain, Meg McDonald, has been omitted. Named on an extended bench, Bridie O'Rourke, Gabby Featherston, Caitlin Thorne, Alexis Gregor, and Sienna Talariti. Talariti being the number 1 draft pick for... I think she was first-round draft pick for Geelong this past draft. So Daria Bannister, horrendously timed injury for Essendon. I think it might be a red flag for anyone that is considering holding or had held Bonnie Toogood. I think this all but confirms that Toogood will need to spend a time deeper forward because however you might think about it, Bannister was the Bombers' most important forward with Bonnie Toogood out, and it's a 3 to 4 week broken hand, and just adding to a horrid run of injuries for the Bombers with also out our best halfback in Maddie Gay, our second best halfback in Maddie Gay as well. So Bookend's really struggling. The player named in that's most fascinating to me is Steph Wales. Now that she's named in, Courtney Murphy has to go. We're agreed on that? Time to cash out?
Yeah, possibly. I think there's a question mark whether she's going to be named in the end, just because I imagine this is we'll name her and we'll see how she pulls up closer to the day. But yeah, the second she's in, Courtney Murphy is surely out.
I think there's a case to be made that if you need the red dot this week and you don't need the cash from a downgrade, you can hold. But it is a case of if you do hold, like the only ruck that you're trading in at the moment, who's playing, if that's what you're after, plays whenever Carlton plays, so early on Saturday. So you'd be locking in that trade early, and you wouldn't then be able to pivot. So something to be considering if you are someone who has Courtney Murphy and you do want to be able to keep a red dot to be able to loot with. In terms of the players in these games, it's a very it's not exactly the world's most high fantasy relevancy game. I think Georgie Prasparkas, I'd be expecting her to bounce back. I don't think the Bombers have the bodies at the moment to be running a hard tag.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest thing for her because she's gone back-to-back difficult games on that front. So it'll be nice to see her spread out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think she'll be definitely freed up in this one. In terms of the players that I'm watching out for, I think Aisling Maloney has dominated the Bombers when she's played against them in the past. She kind of had her big breakout game in a final up against the Bombers a couple of years ago because the Bombers do not have the bodies. Elise Gamble is tall enough but too slow. Georgia Clark is not tall enough and only just quick enough to kind of go with Lingy Maloney. So it's a play. It's a possible consideration if you are looking forward. I think she's going to be able to score massively this week and really beat up on the Bombers. And I wouldn't be tipping them as much as one team is 3-0 and the other team is 0-3.
Yeah.
As sad as that is to say. Now, there's a couple of potential debuts in this game for the Bombers, as well as for Geelong. I'd say that for the Bombers, I'd say I might lean towards Grace Brooker as the player that gets a game, but just given the type of forward that she was and that we kind of saw in the practice match. Former rugby player, probably going to bash and crash in a similar way to Daria Bannister without nearly as much of that class marking and kind of in front of goal. But I wouldn't say that with much confidence. I really have not had a great read on who's going to debut. It could absolutely be Sophie Strong. Did you, Johnny, did you have a view on whether or not you think that Talariti or Gregor has played, or have you had a chance to talk to Will, given that he usually has an opinion on these things?
Yeah, no, I did have a chance to talk to Will, but it wasn't particularly helpful. He was just filthy that McDonald had been dropped. Didn't understand it under any circumstances. I'm assuming that the reason Melissa Bragg has gone out is because Featherstone's coming back in as that second ruck. So I think that one's very likely. A few of these names surprised me a little bit because you take Sienna Talaridi. She was named with a 1 to 2 week ankle injury this week. So I'm not quite sure why they're there, to be honest. I'm assuming this is going to come down to either O'Rourke or Thorne as the most likely to play. But we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, outside of that, like it will be a question as to whether or not Chantal Mason holds after she had a, impactful game, but was unable to kick straight, which really did hamper Geelong's chances of winning. So, as much she's a relatively popular forward to have a look at trading in, just keep that in mind that she's currently, I'd say, on the very fringe of this list. Moving across to the final game, it is Wallich Marawa against Yatapulti. No outs for Wallich Marawa. Only one for Yatapulti. It is Kirsty Lamb. For the Eagles, named on an extended bench, Kaylee Kavanagh, Amy Franklin, Dana Hooker, and then for Yatapulti, it's Cheyenne Hammond, Jasmine Evans, Jasmine Stewart, and Kobe Morgan. I know nothing about Kobe Morgan, if I'm being perfectly honest, which is tough to do given how much I do pore over these numbers and these lists. In terms of this game, Jess Wrench has been named in the midfield, as has Ash Woodland. It stood out to me most prominently on the team sheet, the fact that Kirsty Lamb is out injured. I feel like that all but books in some additional midfield time for Ash Woodland this week. Are you taking much else away from these team sheets? Anything else that stood out to you?
Not massively. I'd suggest that Shanae Goody also was a big part of that midfield last week, and so she'll probably get a look in as well. I'm hoping that with West Coast being an improvement on the Gold Coast midfield from last week, that hopefully Woodland off the back of stoppage can get amongst it a little bit more. But yeah, beyond that, I think these teams are roughly as they were last week. It's nice to see that this is the first week Ella Roberts hasn't made changes on the ruck department.
So. Ella Roberts is now making the coaching decisions, is she?
Oh, sorry, Daisy Pearce. I'm struggling.
It is a far later recording than we usually go with. Yeah,
the idea of Ella Roberts being West Coast at this point, I think, is a fair enough thing as well. She's dominated this season.
Which is ridiculous to say, given that their coach is Daisy Pearce, who was considered the AFLW for many seasons. Yeah. I agree. I think, Ella Roberts has been spectacular, has a beautiful run. If you were going to take a stab, I really wouldn't hate having a go at her as a trade-in. If you couldn't get up to Ash Riddell, that's where I'd be looking.
Now, one question that I do have is a decision I have to make this week, and it's between Jess Wrench playing against Port Adelaide and Rebecca Ott playing against the Hawks, because Lucy Wales is quite restrictive on her day. I'm wondering where would you go there given recent form and the matchups?
That is a tough one. I think that the additions back into this team help Jess Wrench stay in the midfield.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good matchup for someone who loves a tackle, just with what we know about the way that Port Adelaide want to play the game.
Yeah, because there was a big drop-off last week in Wrench's midfield time.
Yeah, and it was almost all kind of in the latter half of the game where they're kind of throwing all the chips in to try and make something happen late.
Yeah, and to be honest, they worked. And that's got me a little bit concerned.
Yeah, but part of it worked because no one could stop Ella Roberts. That can happen whenever. I also just think that it definitely spoke to a more inexperienced side. I feel like West Coast were struggling with the typical windy conditions at RSEA Park in Moorabbin. I think that might have contributed to it fairly substantially. I'm personally looking at trading out Wrench this week, but that's just given the players that I have to trade out as well. I feel like Wrench, Rashid, and Patrikios are all the number one trade out targets for me. So on that basis, I'll just be, going with the simple option. I don't have that toss-up to make.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all the games. Now, we've been going for just over an hour. I'm going to try and rapid-fire some questions. Okay, here's a question for you. Is it Gemma Rigoni and an 880k forward in, or is it Paige Scott and an 839k defender?
I'm going to be honest. You were saying things and I got completely lost.
Okay, so you can get Paige Scott and any defender, Harriet Cordner or cheaper. So you could get Charlie Thomas if you don't already have her. Jenna Richardson, Emma Swanson, Emma Carney is her name. We probably should have mentioned Paxi Paxman, Neve McLaughlin. Or you could go Gemma Rigoni as one of the few defensive rookies who's popped up for us to bring in, and a forward cheaper than 880k. So that is anyone that isn't more expensive than Woodland. So that's Barnett, Gould, Zanker, Tani Evans, Lee Maloney, Megan Kaufman, who you are a noted fan of. Those are your options. Which side do you prefer?
Yeah, I think I'm assuming that all players are playing on field. And in that case, I'd probably rather be relying on Paige Scott up forward, because I think you lose less. Like the forwards, the top line scoring for the forwards, I don't think has been as high as what the defenders are doing. And I think some of your defender options there are pretty incredible. Like Thomas, we know is a top defender. Jenna Richardson's a top defender. Emma Carney. Like these are players I'd be very comfortable relying on. Whilst I think when it comes to your forward line, we seemed pretty set that Malloy, Goldsworthy, Ham, and Woodland were going to be the players that ended up in that top 5 come the end of the season. And anyone else is going to feel like a bit more of a risk and could go up and down. So I think Paige Scott looked a lot more comfortable in that last game. I'd probably go there in the hope that she can keep that up over the next 2, as opposed to Rigoni, who
I don't have much trust in.
Yeah, I just don't have that faith either.
Yeah, I think that Paige Scott, they're a must play for Richmond at the moment. And so at the very least, I would hope you don't have to rely on them scoring on field. It's a very risky process, but I think that's where I'd be leaning as well. Now, question here from Josh. Would you rather get Boyd and hold an extra 150k, or get Heath/Chapman or someone at that price range this week? Also, he wants to know, outside of Boyd, who is the best defender to trade in under 724k?
724.
It's not a great spot. I don't know. I saw this question earlier and had a look. There is a gulf of between 7. There's no one between 735 and 709k this week.
I mean, I have a friend who has been running with Yasmin Dersma and has been very happy the last 2 weeks. But yeah, it's definitely a tricky pool to be going in.
I'll have a look at what options I think are passable in that sub 724k range. But the big question for you is Boyd and Cash, or the Heath Chaplin option?
Yeah, this has got to be one of the trickiest questions, because I think Boyd and Heath, to me, are the big 2 targets this week. I'd go both of those over Chaplin personally. Yeah, I mean, Tessa Boyd, the value is just insane. And I would expect she'd go up another, 150k this week.
Yeah, her break-even will be very low.
Yeah, whilst you compare it to Heath. And I think Heath's probably going to score as well, if not better, than Boyd. But because she's got the 50 and the 39 in the price cycle, it's the 101 that's dropping off. I don't think the cash rise is going to jump away from you this week. So unless you've got plans for next week to do some other trade that does not involve the backline, I think you can probably wait on Heath longer than you can on Boyd. I think really it's Boyd this week, or you've probably just missed the rise, because at that point she'll be, 450, 500k more expensive than when you could have had her in your side.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like you're going to get the double benefit in this instance. Now, I haven't had enough time to really come up with a good list of defenders. I'm just kind of trying to have a look at some of the solid runs in that time. I think Geelong have a good run for defenders, and Meg Mac is out. So if you want to go a bit speculative, you could have a stab at Georgie Rankin, who I think becomes the kick-in taker. I like the call of Yaz Dersma. I really like as well Erica O'Shea, just given how much we saw the ball live on the wing. And Paxi Packman really scored well. Which actually, a name I was going to bring up earlier, I completely forgot about, is Tess Craven. I think she's definitely worth a look for people. That's a dire spot to be looking in, if you ask me.
What about Lucy Cronin, who has a 28 dropping off, has gone 63, 67 in her last couple?
That's a good call. In terms of runs for Collingwood North, Sydney Hawthorn, none of whom are great matchup for defenders, but I think it's not a bad play. It's a bad matchup this week if you were looking to jump off quickly. Maybe one you could get a look at. Hang on, let's just see how they've scored. There's so many names I'm trying to remember here. Another great matchup this week is Western Bulldogs. So if you're looking for a player who's bringing in a Carlton defender, I'd say you could take a stab at Amelia Velada or Yaz Dersma, depending on how much you want to spend. But yeah, that's a pretty dire spot to be looking in. Okay, let's see if we can get very, very close to the 1 hour 15 mark. Let's us answer one final question. Is it worth going... Oh, well, there's a question here. Is it worth going Fish to Sheeran for the cash to go Bowers to Riddell?
So this is a tough question because I do think the early trade out of Fish is absolutely viable. I don't think you need to ride her all the way to the top. I think at some point you want to jump off because, I mean, there will be a low score coming. I don't know when it's going to happen. She's looking incredible, but we've never seen a rookie get anywhere near this. I think there's a 50 to 60 score at some point in her future.
100% time on ground last week too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think at some point they're going to tag her because like what she's providing them is incredible.
And she takes all the kick-ins too.
Yeah. At the moment, my plan is to trade out Fish this week. And I think I'm trying to go up to Riddell from there. Going down to Sheeran feels odd, but I mean, I can see it because I would expect Sheeran to outscore Fish from this point forward, and you're making 150K whilst doing so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's wild. I rate it as a play, and I think that you've got like 15 points going Bowers up to Riddell each week. So I don't think it's mad. I think it is a great play to be making. That was a question from Max. All right, well, we'll stop yapping on. Hopefully people have... There's a lot of questions in there, but we have talked about a lot of players. Jono, you've kind of given away your trades at the moment. Currently, I'm looking at turning Georgia Patrikios into Shelley Heath. I agree with you wholeheartedly. She is someone who is artificially a little bit cheaper at the moment. Save us hearing anything more about her health and any concerns from Melbourne. That's where I'll be looking this week, as much as I still am considering Ailish Sheeran as the target as well, given I feel like she will also be an excellent option. Hopefully, it's a successful week for everyone, and Mel's premonition that we don't need to worry about any late-minute changes. Good luck, everyone. Happy trading, and you'll hear from us early next week, most likely on Tuesday. Cheers.
Good luck, all.